Out of the wildfires burning across western Canada, sending toxic smoke across the border, sparking air quality alerts in multiple states. Faith Abubi is in Minneapolis, Minnesota with the latest. Good morning, Faith.
Hey, good morning to you, George. There's a slight haze in the air right now. Officials here in Minnesota have issued an alert for the entire state. The air quality here reached into the red category this morning, meaning that it's unhealthy for everyone. States in the upper Midwest, as far south as Omaha, could also see hazy skies today. This is all being fueled by the more than 140 wildfires that are currently raging in Canada. Dozens of them have been labeled out of control. Thousands of people in British Columbia are being urged to leave immediately. The smoke continues to drift down over the U.S. And all of this, of course, is reminiscent of last summer when we saw the Canadian wildfire smoke drift so far down that even New York City skyline saw its skyline turn into a bright orange. Clearly this morning, we're not seeing anything close to that here in Minnesota, but officials here are urging people to limit their time outdoors and keep their windows closed. Now, as for the smoke, we're expecting the worst of it to dilute today, and then what's left of it could reach Kansas by tomorrow. Robin.
All right, Faith, thanks. And we're, of course, thinking of our good neighbors to the north in all this. Appreciate you.
This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. It's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's just another government-created forest fire that they can blame on climate change. And again, if you haven't noticed, our government has gone literally scorched earth. They are burning everything they possibly can, and I'll get into why later in the video. But let's start with what's going on once again the same time last year up in Canada. You know, northern Canada, and of course the same story, right? On fire, and the smoke spreading to America, where people are having problems breathing, where we're seeing orange skies again. But don't worry about the orange skies that you're seeing. Don't you remember last year when Nat Geo rolled out propaganda telling us that orange skies are the future, so we need to prepare for it? Because of climate change, we all need to just prepare for orange skies all the time. And the more this keeps happening, the more desensitized people get to it. And they have the established boogeyman in place, which is climate change, so that you don't ask questions as to why, and you just accept this. Because it's, you know, they tell us 2 degrees warmer in the ocean, all of a sudden, fires are popping up all over the place. But of course, we all know that is not the case, because many of us have even seen helicopters setting fires to a lot of the forests out in the open. But of course, the Associated Press and the mainstream media comes out and tells us, no. You may have seen a helicopter dumping fire out in the forest, but that fire was actually to prevent the fire. Because that makes sense, right? Whenever there's a fire, what we do is we throw more fire on it, right? If your house is on fire, instead of using water to put it out, you just dump more gasoline on it, right? Well, that's what the Associated Press was trying to tell us, and the mainstream media, when people were noticing a lot of these fires in California, that helicopters were literally dumping fire on top of the fire, but they were telling us, no, that's just to prevent it, because fire prevents fire. That's common sense. And again, we're living in a world where people are discussing if men can have babies or not, so why not discuss if a fire can actually put out a fire? Huh? Yeah. So, for those of you not paying attention, our government has created and have been able to weaponize weather for a long period of time. And they do this through cloud seeding and geoengineering, among many other things. So, let me start with just a few quotes from Lyndon B. Johnson and John F. Kennedy, openly talking about weather modification and he who controls the weather being able to control the world. Again, these are 2 former presidents who are openly discussing weather control, but we've all been trained that you can't control the weather, you can't control Mother Nature. These are all things they want you to think when they've openly admitted to weather control, and how having weather control would enable somebody to control the world. Now, who is that somebody, of course? Well, then you start thinking about the people who are kind of involved in all this stuff with the climate, right? Like Bill Gates and Bezos, all these climate enthusiasts who are telling you that we have to do these things and change the way that we live, on top of telling you that they want to change your behavior. But let's just take a look at how they've openly discussed weather modification and weather control, which is climate change.
Weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world. That will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer. And he who controls the weather will control the world.
We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
So now that you're understanding that, right, we talk about cloud layering and the many things that come from geoengineering, including droughts, including poisoning our crops. But let's look at this aspect since we're talking about the wildfires, right? Because a lot of people out there hear this and they're like, oh, so you're saying that the government's committing arson, right? They're committing arson. We'll get to the why at the end of the video, but you're saying the government's creating arson. How could the government create arson, right? How could they do that? It's just climate change, right? Well, let's start with what you just heard, right? Cloud layers, geoengineering, weather control. If you didn't know what's being sprayed from the sky, aluminum and barium are being sprayed from the sky. Thus, a lot of people have higher chances of getting Alzheimer's, dementia, all these things are on the rise, right? Cancer rates. But also what people don't realize is that there's this thing in there which is called aluminum dust. That's the aluminum with the barium. It's aluminum dust. And aluminum dust serves as an accelerant. But let's start just from the basics here, okay? We've been told our whole lives to do what? Recycle, right? Recycle, recycle, recycle. And again, that's how mind control works. Beat it into someone's head. They don't ask questions. They just obey. So we've always been told to recycle, and nobody's even asked why. They're like, help the environment, recycle. Well, what we've been recycling for is to give these important aluminum cans back to the government so that they could grind those cans out and create aluminum dust, thus, you know, what they're spraying on us from above. So let's take it from that standpoint. A can of Coke, a can of Red Bull, whatever you might have seen last, just envision this getting grinded up and turned into aluminum dust. So once that aluminum, once those cans, whatever it starts in the form of a can or whatever else, ends up turning into aluminum dust, right? Then they take that aluminum dust and they go to the local military base, the closest one possible where you're not allowed to ask questions or wonder what in the world the military is actually doing. And then they have these little things on the planes. You see those? And they fill them up with aluminum dust. And then after they do that, this happens above your head while you're too busy looking down at your phone.
Can't sleep tonight, 'cause I gotta run, gotta hide, and I'm running from this nightmare. I turn around, but there's no one there, and I'm running from this nightmare, running from this nightmare.
So then we're like, oh, okay, so that's what all that is in the sky, right? They're spraying aluminum and they're spraying barium and it's turning into aluminum dust and we'll never see it because it's invisible, right? And it's falling all over us. But then what ends up happening? Well, if you're not familiar with aluminum dust, it's an accelerant, right? Let me take an example of this and show you an example, of this. This is aluminum dust. This is what happens when aluminum dust gets near fire.
This time I've seen you before inside my mind, but my heart beats faster
So that's what's being sprayed from the skies, right? It's like dumping accelerant from the skies. It does more than just serve as an accelerant. It can be used as an accelerant, but it could also be used to poison your flesh, which is exactly why so many people are sick. Quite so often, why people are having so many diseases on their skin, all these things that they don't want you to know about, right? So then we see, right, they spray it down. There you have your aluminum dust sprayed, and it just fizzles into the air. You don't even see it because it's like, nano. It's so tiny. You know that word nanotech? I mean, nanoparticles, right? So then after all of that, you might say, well, big deal. Big deal. They dumped that from the sky. It's aluminum dust. So what? How does that prove that they're committing arson? Well, you can go back to that first article that I showed you from the Associated Press about helicopters setting fires to trees to prevent, wink, wink, wildfires. And let's start with just basic stuff that we've seen over the years of helicopters, of military planes doing this over, large forests. Oh, okay, so then you set the fire, right? And it doesn't need, it could happen in one of three ways, right? You could start with that perspective. Actually, a lot more than one in three ways, but I'll show you one in three ways, right? A helicopter then setting flames to these forests, which are doused in aluminum dust. Or you could just use the hottest new technology, the same technology we see being used over in Israel. We could see this, or they could do this, I should say, using a drone, just flying over. Imagine those forests in Canada that are now burning. You can just send a bunch of these over there, right? Well, those are two easy ways. But then, of course, if you have a forest that's dumped in accelerant, maybe the easiest way, the most, simplest way that people will never notice in the middle of a forest, of course, would be to use one of these, a direct energy weapon on a doused forest that's covered in accelerant.
The British Ministry of Defence has released the first footage of its new Dragonfire laser gun shooting down a drone in the skies over Scotland.
The Dragonfire is a prototype laser that's cost more than £140 million to develop. It claims to be able to shoot down an object the size of a pound coin from more than a mile away. Now, it's been in development for many, many years. It's been running later than planned. We've seen 3 releases of information on this significantly. The first was the first ever photographs of the drone shooting down a tethered target. More recently, we saw still photographs of the same laser shooting down a drone that was flying. And now the Ministry of Defence has released the footage. Now, the footage is not particularly different to those still images. What we see is a laser beam shooting up into the sky at around a 45-degree angle. One of the complexities that the people who've been developing this weapon have had to overcome is how to produce such a powerful laser without actually destroying the device and the mirrors within the device that aim it onto its target. And one of the other problems, of course, is where does that laser beam end? If you're shooting it at the sky, what is behind your target? Is it going to hit something in space? Now, these are potentially the future weapons of war. They do not require ammunition, so potentially it's a gun that never runs out of ammo. The prediction at the moment is these sorts of devices will initially be based on large warships, because those warships can generate the power, the electricity that the lasers need. But actually, what we learned, the Ministry of Defence claimed that it costs just about £10 a pop to fire this. So if and when these weapons are produced on a larger scale, they may actually produce huge savings for the armed forces, particularly giving them the capability to shoot down threats from swarms of drones, which is something, as we've seen in the Ukraine war, an evolving threat, and of course we've seen in the Red Sea with the Houthi Iran-backed Houthi rebels based in Yemen attacking shipping in the Red Sea. So another landmark, or at least a release of information from another landmark in the development of this British laser gun.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's how this whole thing works. That's what's going on around us. There is no such thing as climate change. What is actually occurring is weather control and weather modification, and then doing things like this. And when you have a boogeyman built in place, you can make forest fires and blame it on an invisible man. Then nobody's held accountable. That's why it's the perfect weapon to use. Silent weapons for quiet wars. Nobody even realizes there's a war going on. And of course, conveniently, you see that all the same people who were involved in the outbreak, the Bill Gateses of the world, have their hand in all of this type of technology, right? All these things that they tell you are conspiracy theories have actually been proven to be conspiracy fact, which is why they silence all of us. These guys control the tech as well, right? So you're saying to yourself, okay, so they're dumping aluminum dust from the sky. Then they're lighting it on fire. Why would they do that, right? That's the big question that a lot of people struggle with. Why would they do that? Now, we could think back throughout history, whether it's Rome, the Roman Empire, or other empires, and all they've ever wanted to do was what? Control, have control. Everybody thinks it's about wealth and about money. They print money. That's boring to them. It's about control, controlling the people. Having the people be subservient to them, having the people be slaves to them, right? So when you start burning the earth and you start burning the trees and you're getting rid of carbon, something that would serve as a real carbon vacuum that they don't want, which is a tree, which would automatically fight climate change. They don't want that. So they want to make sure there's no trees, there's no resources up here. Why? Because they want you to come to them. So when the government starts destroying all the Earth's resources, right? When they could conveniently not be destroying it because we know they can manipulate the weather so they can make it rain if they wanted it to rain to prevent droughts. They don't want you to know that, right? Why would they want you to know that? Because they don't want to help. They don't want to help starvation the way that would make the most sense, which would be by, well, why don't you cloud seed over these places that get droughts all around the world and plant seeds and then everybody would have food. Well, then how would they control any of us, right? So instead, they'll do the opposite. They'll make droughts. They'll block the sun. They'll make it difficult to farm. So then when they're burning up all the Earth's surface, all of us just keep moving, right? You got to just keep moving out of these areas. Same ones that get hit with tornadoes, the same ones that get hit with hurricanes. All of a sudden, you can't live there anymore, right? I recently covered how FEMA was buying people's homes, saying, oh, they were flood risks with our tax money, right? And nobody's suspicious as to why FEMA would want to do that. Well, they buy the properties up, then you can no longer move to these areas. You have to move to different areas. And little by little, you don't realize that it's very similar to how a sheep herder herds his sheep, right? They're all out there. He starts coming around. He starts moving them, right? He got his little sheepdog or whatever he's got. And suddenly the sheep just start moving in the direction that he wants to move them in, right? You say to yourself, oh, okay, so they're moving us. So where are they moving us? Well, the same people who want to control you want to enslave you. And the only way they could do that is through technology, of course, because they're talking about this new AI governance, right? AI governance. Have you heard that term? That's the whole reason you see the infrastructure around the earth getting destroyed. That's why you see criminals running free, crime rates through the roof. It's because they want to destroy the infrastructure so that they could bring about smart city governance. This is right from the World Economic Forum's website. This is obviously everybody hears about clause, they hear all this stuff, and they don't really understand what they're doing. They're deliberately sabotaging the entire world so they could bring in their government, their new artificial intelligence government. Of course, it's all controlled by tech, so you're not supposed to believe there's a tyrant behind it. You're supposed to believe that it's just organically, it's not discriminating. Technology doesn't discriminate. Technology doesn't shut your technology off or do anything like that. It doesn't shut your thermostat. Oh, yes, it does, of course. Only if you're not compliant. That means if you start questioning these people or you start rebelling against them or suddenly you decide that you want to be free from your smart city and leave your dome, well, the government's going to shut your electricity off and your allotted allowance time is no longer going to be in your account because this is what it's all headed towards. And that is smart city governments, everything within 15 minutes. Listen to them talk about this at the World Economic Forum. And of course, listen how wonderfully he mentions that you're not allowed to buy a car, but what do you need one for, man? What do you need a car for? Everything's within a fingertip. Don't think about, well, maybe you'll want to go see grandma in another state, or maybe you'll just want to get out of there because you've had enough. Don't worry, you could trust us. Give all your rights to us as we burn the world around you and then tell you, come to these freedom cities. There's resources here. We have the resources. Just put that magic potion in your body so you can hook up to these towers around us, and we'll give you food and water so you can energize yourself like a battery. Here they are talking about smart city, and this is what a smart city looks like.
For policies really to change the rules of the game, no? So that sustainability becomes the easier choice, not just for the people, but also for the companies, no? So I think an important measure in Switzerland was to have support for renewable energy, for energy efficiency, but also then changing the way districts work. For instance, in Zurich, we have a lot of districts where you actually don't need a car because all the activities, school, buying something, everything you can do in walking distance, And by doing that, people don't buy a car. And it's not felt like actually they would like to have a car and they are not allowed to have it, but they simply don't need it because the environment was built in a way that they don't need it. And I think this is what policy needs to do. They have to change the environment. So a sustainable lifestyle, a lifestyle in harmony with nature is the easiest way to go. And also for the companies. And here perhaps a last point. I really like what you said on following through. We had all these nice commitments. We had the Paris Agreement. We also here at World Economic Forum have every year very nice commitments. What's important is really to follow through.
What is a 15-minute city and why are conspiracy theorists jumping on it? You may have seen this, a vision of what the future of the world's big cities might look like, but some on TikTok aren't happy.
You won't be able to do that.
Spoiler, they've got nothing to worry about. 15-minute cities are basically where bigger cities are divided up into smaller sections or neighbourhoods. This man came up with the idea. It means everything people need, like shops, gyms and bars, are all within a 15-minute walk or cycle. With town planners making places better to live in, they'll reduce carbon emissions with fewer people needing to use their cars, in turn improving people's health. Parts of London, as well as Paris and Cleveland in the US, are looking at adopting them, while Melbourne and Copenhagen have both started something similar. But conspiracy theorists are saying this is a government's plot to put us all back into lockdown. That's not true.
Oxfordshire County Council recently received abuse for their plan and had to issue this statement after some, including Katie Hopkins, said things like this.
You will only have 15 minutes of freedom. This is real.
We know that's not the case. There are some legitimate criticisms, though, about whether getting rid of cars would really work and whether people might mix less with those living elsewhere. But if it's better for the planet and makes life more convenient, could people get on board with a 15-minute city?
Mayor Bibb introduced the idea of being the first 15-minute city in the United States. He did this in his State of the City address last night.
The urban planning model is new, but city planners told our Sarah Shookman the time is now to tap into federal dollars to address some of Cleveland's deeper problems.
Imagine a Cleveland where everything you need is less than 15 minutes away.
It's this ideal planning framework where human needs and desires are accessible within a 15-minute walk, bicycle ride, or transit trip. And that's really what we're striving for in this new planning model.
City planner Matt Moss says it doesn't have to be a dream. Instead of a concrete jungle where people work and separate places where people live, in a 15-minute city, everything is closer.
It's starting out with the city we have now, and then asking residents how they might want their community to grow or change in ways that, again, make things more accessible or provide them with more opportunities to access the things they want to get to in their day-to-day lives.
First, planners are making a list of what's there, things like grocery stores, parks, schools, but also workplaces. In some neighborhoods, it's more quality that's lacking due to busted sidewalks or lack of bike lanes or bus stops. In others, whether it's green space or food justice, they're lacking altogether.
The problem isn't that we just don't have a store. It's sort of like, well, why don't we have a store? And we need to dig under and get at the roots of that problem.
Case Western professor Darcy Friedman directs the Swetland Center for Environmental Health. Her research has shown addressing nutrition equity can start a strategy of change.
Because unless people have the ability to eat a healthy, nutritious meal every day, I don't know how we can talk about people being prepared to, go into our education systems or get the best job available for them.
Along with building, the city says changes to zoning restrictions and development incentives are likely necessary. Friedman urges community members to make sure they're at the table.
Not just asking, demanding to say, where is the space for us to inform what this looks like?
Those opportunities for participation are coming, the city says, noting that the payoff here is a greener, more sustainable city with more solidarity between neighbors. But let's be real, this change will not happen overnight. Laura, city planners say the timing is right, though, with funding from federal infrastructure bill and some other sources, and we will keep you updated as to how we can all weigh in.
So ultimately, it's about smart city governance, right? So people go, well, I'm never going to live in a smart city. We're not going to have a choice. That's the point. You see, there's not enough prison cells for all of us to be put in. They view us as cattle and sheep. And in their eyes, they think that we should be thankful that they're letting us even live. And in a lot of cases, they're not allowing people to live. But if you survive what they're doing, ultimately, they'll say, look, be thankful that we're letting you live in our smart city. And you're going to live as cattle. And we're going to run experiments on you. And we're going to control your thoughts. And we're going to read your mind. And we're going to monitor every single piss that you take and every breath that you make. Everything. But be thankful for it. Smile. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. And that's ultimately what they're doing. So they're destroying the Earth's surface. They're hurting human beings where they live because they know nobody will willingly go into these enslavement cities. They know that there's a certain group of people called Democrats and the young Gen Zers who don't get it. And they'll smile and they'll just be glad that they don't have to work and they can play video games all day inside their smart city till they get there and they realize they only get 2 hours a day of allotted time, like a prisoner gets recess time. And they'll shut their power off and they'll tell them it's all in the name of the climate. And they'll all just bow down and they'll say, okay, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the good thing, right? Just like when they put masks on their face for no reason whatsoever. And they said, well, even if I'm wrong about all this stuff, at least I'm being a good person. You're not. Because that's what clueless sheep will do. So this is what we're headed towards. And this is why you're seeing more and more wildfires. Remember the carbon vacuums that I covered, right? The carbon vacuums are what they want to do, to suck all the carbon out of the air and put it underground so that they could live underground, farm underground, do all these things underground. Well, the Earth's surface is destroyed. Human beings are going to be moved around because of these weather events. And FEMA camps are going to begin popping up like they did in Maui, like they did in California, like they are all around the Earth. Right now, government-created FEMA camps. Of course, they look like little Prisons, if you haven't seen them. Little dystopian cities, right? Hey, come in here, you know? Oh, wow, free housing? Yeah, free housing. It's temporary. Wink. It's temporary. 1 year goes by, 2, 5. Well, that's conditioning, right? After 5 years, like, well, I guess I'm used to it. I might as well stay here, right? Then the government will start charging you a little bit out of your allotted allowance to even live in the house that they gave you after they burned your other one to the ground, right? Through weather modification, geoengineering, they're doing all of this while everybody looks around and wonders if men could have babies, if women should play men's sports or men should play women's sports, or all these nonsensical, pointless issues that they know are a total waste of time. And they laugh as they experiment on the human mind and watch as people actually have legitimate debates and arguments about men having babies instead of going after the people responsible for what they're calling climate change, which is really nothing more than climate sabotage through weather modification and weather control. So, these fires are being started on purpose as they spray aluminum, barium, aluminum dust on us. You have an accelerant in place, and then you have all these different options, which I guess it just depends what day of the week it is, whether they want to hit a drone up or they want to just fly a helicopter in plain sight over and drop fire and tell you that fire stops fire, and you're supposed to just nod your head and agree. And it's a conspiracy if anything that questions, the AP saying helicopters that are setting fire to trees are preventing fires. Huh? Yeah, don't think for a second. Keep going. Men can have babies, right? Men can have babies, yeah. Helicopters are setting fire to trees, but it's preventing it, not causing. Oh, okay, right? Or a direct energy weapon, which, again, you hear about the technology the government has with direct energy weapons. You see what happens in Maui. And, well, when people start getting suspicious, you just never hear about Maui again, right? Which is what has happened. No one's heard a peep about Maui except people who are very into the story and trying to get the word out. But you haven't heard the mainstream media mention Maui. You haven't heard The Rock or Oprah come back out talking about Maui. Why would they realize, all right, people got a little suspicious of this. We probably have to keep these stories on the down low. We won't blast them over the media, and if we don't blast it over the media, nobody knows it's even going on because the media, of course, is the nucleus for the human mind these days. They think reality is whatever they're being fed on the television. It's all manufactured, and that's how they manufacture humans. So the government, again, in Canada, doing this to their civilians, the civilians in America, just get used to waking up to the new norm. Orange skies, air pollution, no big deal, right? Eventually you have to go to a safe haven that the government have set up for you, but don't be suspicious of that. They care, right? They care about all of us. Yeah. These psychopaths are of their father, the devil, and they show you this through how they behave, how they act, and the things that they're doing. Do not be deceived by the news and the media. There's a reason they constantly bring attention to things like HARP with the solar flare, like the wildfires. They're not direct energy weapons. Chemtrails aren't really chemicals, they're contrails. It's water vapor that sits in the sky for 24 hours because everybody knows water would just stay visible in the sky for 24 hours. Stop asking questions, would you please? Well, of course they want you to stop asking questions because they think of you as dumb cattle. And the more you think, the more of a threat you become to them. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist, which isn't even a real thing, to actually figure out what these people are trying to do. All it takes is a little thinking. Look at the people who are involved in all of these climate activities, the same ones who are involved in wanting to get potions inside your body, the same faces, right? The same corporations, the same communist global dictatorship that they're setting up around us. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.